Welcome everyone. Sorry, we're just maybe 30 seconds late. Welcome to another live guest interview within the Mindful Journey. I'm so delighted to have someone who I got to meet a few years back through a mutual friend and have just been fascinated by the conversations we've had and how he's challenged me just with unique thinking. And many of you have probably already seen his resume and background, but I'm going to share a little bit more about it here with you before we get into conversation. We've got Dave Roberts with us here today. Dave is currently teaching at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. He's actually a graduate from Cornell, I believe both his bachelor's and master's from there, and then went on to get his MBA from Northwestern Kellogg School of Business. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that to be true. And then Dave spent a large part of his career with Marriott, over 20 years. Most recently, having retired in 2019, he held the role of Senior Vice President of Revenue Management or Revenue Strategy and Solutions. And ultimately in that role was responsible for the pricing and the revenue management and execution of over 7,000 hotels globally, worldwide. But what's, again, like all of our guests we've been so fortunate to have, what's most impressive to me personally about Dave isn't so much his resume, but his desire to serve. So we're going to talk a lot about leadership today. We're going to delve into a little bit of that revenue management, talk a little bit about mental health, and our goal and objective is to leave you all on this call inspired, maybe just challenged to think a little bit differently, and hopefully you'll find some insight and value from Dave. So with all that being said, welcome to all of you, and Dave, welcome again. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. Appreciate the invite, and hello to all of your listeners.
Yes, great. Well, let's get into it. I don't personally have a deep understanding of revenue management. I'm sure there's many on this call or those who will listen on demand. What the heck is revenue management? I mean, at a high level, what is it?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying revenue management is the passion of my professional life. And I've been involved in it for a quarter century. And all of my time at Marriott was in revenue management. I picked up a few other responsibilities as well. In fact, I love it so much, I spent 2 years writing a book about it. And I'm thrilled to say that book is due out tomorrow. I've been waiting 2 years.
Nice.
Tomorrow, it's out. And the book is about the future of the discipline of revenue management in hospitality. So for your listeners, what it means is pricing. So think about it for hotel rooms. How much should I charge next Wednesday? And the second part of it is what's called inventory management, which is how many of each type of room and space should I sell at that price before I change the price. You put those two components together, and that is the essence of revenue management. And it's a fascinating discipline.
Yeah.
I've been at it for 25 years, and there's a lot more to go.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I did not know about your book. And so selfishly, I'd love to, share that with the community, and I'll be a customer. So please,
I love it.
After we get off, please send me a link of how I can purchase, and I'll put it inside the community as well.
I appreciate that.
Of course. So Dave, I love Marriott personally. That's where I always stay when I go on the road, and I've never really put much thought into the pricing because I know they fluctuate. Sometimes I'm on there and it says, $197 a night. And the next night I'm on there, it's $250 a night. Is there an algorithm that they're leveraging that identifies that price point, or I assume you're scouring the market to see what competitors are doing? How does that look? And does that tie into rev management?
Yeah, that kind of is a very important part of revenue management. And we think of it as a combination of art and science. And the science part is there's some pretty sophisticated modeling that goes into place with competitor rates and demand patterns and finding that optimal price point at any point in time for any future date for every hotel for different types of rooms. And there's just a ton of data analytics that drives that. The art part of it is there's a human that uses that modeling and decides. So think of the computer makes recommendations and the user says, I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. And there's certain times when the user has to use their judgment to say, you know what, I'm not going to do what the computer says because there's certain things that I know that the computer doesn't yet know. Things like like an extreme example, you know what, Beyonce just dropped a concert date in Philadelphia. Well, there's no way the computer would know that immediately, but if you're running revenue management for Philadelphia, you better know that. You better know right away and act on it like in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So there's times to override the computer. So we like to think of it as a balance of art and science.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really neat. So basically, why the pricing on big type of weekends is significantly higher than maybe usually in a given market is because there's strategy behind that, right? You all know, the human knows that there's a concert or Super Bowls here, so we're gonna hike up the price.
Yeah, if you got 5,000 people that want to stay at your hotel and you only have 100 rooms left to sell, you can afford to have a lot of those people say, no, that's too expensive. All you need is a few to say, okay.
Yeah.
And that's the balance.
Very cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, given you obviously, I know you excelled in your career, and I love, and I'm sure folks will be intrigued by what helped get you up to, the executive leadership role within Marriott. But before we delve into that, I'm just kind of curious, having worked in a high pressure environment within a Fortune 500 company like Marriott, and also having operated in an Ivy League culture as a student, what advice do you have for people who might be on the call today who are feeling a little pressure in their life and in their work to perform? Because what can we do to perform better in high pressure moments, essentially?
Yeah, well, pressure is very real, and it is sometimes described as something you put on yourself, except it's a very real phenomenon. And I think some pressure is healthy and even necessary. The problem comes in when you have too much pressure over extended periods of time. If you have this generalized anxiety, your body is in constant stress mode, and your body releases cortisol, and cortisol can be a very good thing, but over a long duration, it's terrible for you. I mean, it leads to weight gain and heart disease and terrible health outcomes. I mean, it's really bad for you over a long period of time. My wife is a nurse, and she likes to say that stress does not cause any problems. Stress magnifies every problem. And so it's really important to recognize what triggers that for you. And I would say to your listeners, think about what triggers stress and pressure for you. And it could be a person, it could be a group of people, it could be a situation. And make a mental note when you're feeling super stressed. Why is that? Exactly why it is. And again, some of it I think is very healthy. I like to, I'm a creature of habit, or I try and instill habit and routine. And I think it's helpful, things like diet and exercise. That's kind of an obvious one. If you're a little bit healthier, you're a little bit better able to deal with stress. One thing that seems to have worked for me is try to have a hobby that is so engrossing that that's all you think about when you're involved in that. And it can be exercising, it can be, doing a particular sport, it can be reading, it can be, beekeeping, anything. Like whatever you're really into, and sort of take a pause from the real world and just focus on that. I find that to be, at least in my experience, I find that to be helpful.
That's good. I like what your wife said. I think that's so true, right? From a standpoint of, stress doesn't necessarily create a problem, but it magnifies. And how can we find levers or remedies to decrease stress so that it doesn't, make a problem worse? And basically what I'm hearing from you is kind of diet, exercise, something beyond work. And I'm a big believer in that and subscribe to that as well. Some sort of hobby. Do you have anything in particular, like a hobby that has been helped? I saw that in your bio that you do martial arts, which I did not know about you. And I think that's pretty cool that you engage in that. But is there anything like martial arts or something else that has
that's been a big one for me for most of my adult life. And I will say for your listeners, it's a bit of trial and error. So if you're taking on certain actions or approaches and you don't find it's helping, don't be discouraged. Try something different. There's a ton of research out there about the impact of stress. There's not a whole lot in terms of answers on this is what you should do. It really is trial and error.
Yeah.
You mentioned martial arts. For me, that's been a big stress relief for quite obvious reasons. If you're doing martial arts and you're not paying attention to that, it doesn't end well for you.
Yeah,
So,
right.
quite literally, by definition, your mind is completely there, and you don't know, other than the person that you may be fighting with, sparring with, you don't know who else is in the room. You don't even know what you're wearing. You don't know anything. You're fully engaged. And, for me, I loved it. I did a lot of kickboxing in my younger days, competitive, and I looked forward to it. I'd come home with a black eye and with a big smile, like, this is awesome. I love it. I want to do it again tomorrow. And it doesn't have to be a sports thing. For me, I'm into astronomy, and I read a lot of books about astronomy. And when reading it, I'm tuned out to the rest of the world. I don't know what room I'm in. I'm just totally focused. And I find that little bit of escape from reality is healthy.
Yeah.
And it's enjoyable for me.
Thank you for sharing. I don't know that I'll get into astronomy. Martial arts sounds intriguing. Astronomy, it's probably way over my head.
It's whatever is of interest. I don't know why. I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. And, my family jokes with me, they'll buy me books for birthday or Christmas. Yeah. And I said, I'm not that well-rounded. I want to read what I pick. but I'm going to pick these same books. Anyway.
Well, I think, there's something we can stay on that topic, because there's value in, I think I've shared this quote with the community before. It's one of my favorites from Albert Einstein. He says, we're all geniuses, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will go around its whole life believing that it's stupid. So what you're saying has value, right? The fact that I know astronomy is over my head, it's probably over my head because I don't have a deep passion for it like you do. I'm sure there are things that I read that you would hate to
absolutely
read. And so I think it's so important for us, and that's one of the, within the mindful journey, one of the themes we're always trying to drive home is just to be introspective and really identify what it is that makes you tick, so that you can become the best version of yourself, and how do you get through adversities, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm glad you shared that, because I think there's value in that, and I didn't want that to be passed. But I'd like to know, Dave, I'm curious, like the culture within Cornell versus the culture in Marriott, and we don't have to just use those two, but just academia versus corporate America. What similarities and differences do you see as it relates to cultures, burnout, and are there some, and are there noticeable differences? Like, are there some similarities?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I'm probably not able to answer it explicitly yet, but I'll share a couple thoughts. So first of all, my time at Marriott, I considered myself incredibly fortunate, incredibly spoiled. Marriott has a magnificent culture. Not everywhere. I mean, handful of exceptions, like everything, but a really glorious corporate culture. And it starts at the top. And it starts, in Marriott's case, it starts with the Marriott family and the senior leadership. And it's almost a platitude for any organization to say that our most valuable asset is our people, our associate, the most valuable, everybody says it. But what does that actually mean? And I was very fortunate, like at Marriott, they take that very seriously and they believe that. And as a result, people stay there a long time. And I was there for 24 years, which is not even remarkable by Marriott standards. It's completely remarkable in most places, but at Marriott, 24, probably longer than average, but not much. It wasn't outstanding in any way. People tend to like it and they tend to stay there. And so I would also say, based on plenty of homework and talking to friends in other places, that Marriott culture is unfortunately somewhat unique or very rare. In academia, it's a little bit more individualistic, in the sense that there tend to be less team projects. I mean, sometimes colleagues will collaborate on research projects, but teaching, it's, my classes, it's me. I ask questions of people if I need help with something, but it's me. It's not a team project, it's me. And in the corporate world, if you are working in a highly functioning corporation, it's teamwork. You don't do anything on your own, with the rarest of exceptions. And I think that's partly the nature of, kind of the nature of the work itself. The teaching is different than corporate life. I will say this though, for your listeners, in my view, it's not so much the difference between types of industries and types of organizations. What matters to me is particular leaders. And if you have a good culture, you can have a really good culture on your team and not in the larger organization. And as an employee, you know what? I care a lot about who my boss is.
Yeah.
I do care about the larger organization, but I care a lot more about who my boss is. And so if you have a good culture with a team, that's going to make you look forward to going to work every day. If you have a bad culture in a team, even in a larger culture that's fabulous, you kind of lose it. So I just want to make that distinction.
Yeah.
It really is about individuals and individual leadership styles.
I love that perspective. Would you elaborate a little more on what you've identified as maybe one or two key attributes that make up an effective leader, being that you had such a good culture? I know you were in a leadership capacity, but I'm sure you still had someone who was your leader essentially. What did he or she possess that really made you feel welcome? If we have some leaders on the call today, I just love to give them something they can kind of work on to become more effective in driving culture.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was very fortunate. I had some fantastic bosses and fantastic mentors in my professional career. Not everybody, and some were, counterexamples. I'll tell you this, for anyone on your call who is in a leadership or supervisory role, I read some research not too long ago about types of bosses. And it turns out that the worst boss you can have is not the one that yells at you and has a temper and curses and throws things. And that's not the worst. The worst kind of boss you can have is the boss that doesn't pay attention to you. And there's a lot of research that backs that up. And I think about that in my own experience. You want a boss that pays attention to you.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite sayings is, a leader does not have time for you. A leader makes time for you. And I've had bosses that, if I need something, they drop what they're doing and focus on me. And you talk about driving morale, that does it. And all it takes is a few of those interactions where, what I've just witnessed is my boss dropping what he or she is doing to focus on me.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You're going to boost morale just like that. So I would say for your listeners, if you're in a supervisory role, make sure you're paying attention to your team individually. Even if you think you are, do it more. And for anybody, you want to be happy at work, find a boss that pays attention to you.
So simple, but so true. And that's it's so interesting to me. Sometimes we get so lost in the minutia of things and we overcomplicate, leadership or whatever it may be. And it comes down to the human element, simply caring, being there for people, being attentive, listening. And to hear it coming from you, somebody who's thrived in corporate America, again, a Fortune 500 organization, I think it's even more powerful because as you've noted, you've had bosses who've not been all that pleasant, and then ones who've been really good. And at the end of the day, them making time for you has been impactful. And we all want to feel valued. And what better way to feel valued than if somebody actually gives you their time? So.
Yeah, it's a very base human need to feel appreciated. You just want, that's literally every human on earth. You just want to feel appreciated. I mean, you want other things too. You want to be liked. You want to be highly regarded. You want to be respected. But at the core, you want to be appreciated. And that's true in a work setting. It's true in a personal setting. You just want to be appreciated. And so I would encourage your listeners to think about that. Do you personally feel appreciated? And what's eye-opening is ask anyone who's in a leadership position, if I were to ask anyone who reports directly to you, do you feel appreciated? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, how appreciated do you feel? Ask the boss, what do you think they would say? And if it's anything less than 10, what would you personally do to drive that up? Think about it in that context. It's, there's a lot more to leadership than just walking around appreciating people. You have to accomplish things.
Yeah, sure.
But if you don't have that part, everything else falls apart in my view. It is that important.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt. And I think that can help. And that's a nice segue into, I wanted to talk about burnout with you specifically, because, it's used everywhere in today's world, especially with COVID. A lot of people are feeling burnout, and we're hearing during this great resignation, folks are just getting into entrepreneurial things or just stopping work for 6 months. And I think it's come as a result of, call it burnout, call it what you may. It's just maybe a lack of passion and connectedness to their work. And I'm sure you saw many times in your world where people were feeling burnt out. And I'm sure you experienced it at some point or another too. Dave, would you share what technique or techniques or anything that you've used to maybe help reignite your passion, so that you did not want to quit when times got tough, or maybe you needed to make an adjustment and go to a different department? It's just anything you can share to help us just understand what we can do to navigate burnout.
Sure. So, I mean, burnout is very real and it's overwhelming. It's very powerful, and you feel it at different points in time. Sometimes it'll catch you by surprise as well. It happens to everybody, and it's a sense of, I'm spinning my wheels and I don't know why. I don't know what for. My approach to that, and I've definitely sensed it a lot, and including in my new job as a professor, I felt it. And what has worked for me is I'm very goal oriented, and it sounds like kind of a type A. I don't think anyone would describe me as a type A person, but I am goal oriented. And I would say, advice for your listeners: if you're feeling burned out, stop and take a deep breath, and maybe spend an hour, turn your computer off, turn your phone off, get out a piece of paper and a pencil, and write down, what exactly do you want to happen? Spell out a good outcome from the point you are currently. What do you want to happen? I want to accomplish these things. I want to have these experiences. I want to whatever. And write down what's going to work for you. What is it that you want? And make those things happen. Like, decide what it is, what can I do to make those things happen? And just start picking away at it. And sometimes these goals are longer term, and that's okay. The time passes anyway. Use time as your ally. Like, make forward progress in some way. And I feel like that helps with burnout. At least for me, it's helped sort of focus on yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a sense of, okay, here is where this is the hand I have. Here's the hand I've been dealt. What do I want to happen? And then let's make that happen. And then you develop a sense of agency. So things aren't happening to you. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is, life happens for you, not to you.
Yes.
And if you have that sense of agency, like you have control over the direction of your life, that, I don't want to make it sound so easy, like that solves burnout. It doesn't, but it helps in my opinion.
Yeah, well, there's power in questions, right? When we ask somebody else a question or we ask ourselves, our brain gets to work to try to identify an answer, solution. So I like what you're sharing. Would you recommend to the listeners that they actually journal out the response when they take that hour and say, what do I actually want to happen? Or is it something where you'd say maybe even just typing a note in your phone or just thinking about, or does it not matter?
For me, I document things. I use an app called Evernote, so I don't actually use pencil and paper. I use Evernote, and I store everything. I mean, I could look up right now what were my goals in 2014. They're in Evernote. They're stored, and I can see, did I do those things? Have I made progress? I think it's very helpful to write things down. It drives that sense of agency, like you have control over this.
Yeah.
I also think it's helpful to discuss them with somebody. And if it's in a work setting, it could be your boss, it could be a mentor, it could be a colleague, it could be a personal friend. Say, this is where I am in life, and here are some things that I would like to happen. And is there a shot that I could make those things happen, and talk through it and get some advice from people? So for me, document it, talk about it, like make it public if you want to.
Yeah, write it down. Good advice. Thank you for sharing. Was just curious. Going back to your career, can you think of something that you learned throughout your career, whether it be leadership or rev management? It could be something tangible that's scientific or art. And have you been able to like leverage it as a way to get you better in your own personal life in martial arts, astronomy, or whatever that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll share something with your listeners that it may come off a little bit like a platitude, but I'm going to say it anyway. My approach, like I said, I'm goal oriented, and I say that too much. It's literally, I'm not a type A person, but I do think about what is it that I want to happen for me or for somebody else, and then cause that to happen. For me, I write down, what do I want to happen? What outcomes do I want? And it can be, you know what, I'd like to get a graduate degree. I'd like to earn certain recognition. I'd like to learn about this topic. I'd like to have better social connections. Whatever it is that you want, write it down. So I use a 3-step process, and here it is. Step 1, write it down. Write down, what exactly do you want to happen? Could be for yourself, if you're a family person, like what do you want to have happen for your kids, your friends, your community? Like, what is it that you would like to see? If you could just wave a magic wand, what would you like to see? That's the first thing. Write it down and be clear about it. Not these vague generalities like, oh, I want to be happier, like whatever. Like, write down, what is it that you want? And then step 2, in my view, is the hard part, which is, okay, I've written down everything that I want to happen or cause to happen. What can I do to make those things happen? And it quite literally is, what I want to learn. I don't know anything about cryptocurrency. I'm going to make a note. I want to learn about cryptocurrency. Okay. Well, in step 2, I'm going to write down, well, how would I do that? Would I take an online course? Would I pull it up on YouTube or go to Khan Academy? Or would I learn, from a financial institution or a friend that knows whatever? Write that down. Or I want to have better social relationships. So, as an example for me, I have probably 30 or so people that I remember their birthdays. It's in my calendar, and every birthday I call them, everyone, even if I haven't talked to them in a year, I call them. So that's like, for me, write it down. And this is the action that I'm going to take. And then step 3 is check off step 2, like literally execute. Do those things.
Yes. Yeah.
The first part of it is just a commitment, and make the commitment to do those things. After that, it's tenacity. It's, you know what, I'm going to do it. You know what, I'm taking an online course and I'm kind of tired. I'd like to go to bed, but I'm not, you know what, I'm going to stay up and finish it. Yes. And if it's important to you, make it happen. Anyway, it's a broad kind of framework of how I approach things. And I'll say that's how I've approached things professionally. That's how I've approached things personally. Yeah. And, we mentioned martial arts. I have a black belt in Hapkido. It took me 9 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
You know what? I just kept going. And
yeah,
I'm either going to die or they're going to give it to me. So
that's
if
awesome.
It's important to you, you just keep plugging away at it.
Yeah. So write it. I wrote this down for myself too. So write it down. You're saying write it down. Step 1. Step 2. What can I do to accomplish whatever it is that I've just written down? What are the steps? And then number 3, very simply, is execute. And if it means enough to me, do I have that right, or those by and large?
That's exactly right. And share it with a trusted friend to say, are these goals reasonable? And then, step 2, do these stated actions actually move me in that direction? Mm-hmm. And then, you know what, you don't need help on step 3. That's just doing it. That's just making a point. If it's important enough to you, right, you're going to do it. And, I applied this recently when I wrote the book. There was a lot of times when I thought this is overwhelming. It's too much. I worked on it for 2 years. Yeah. And I said, you know what, every week I'm going to make progress. No matter how busy I am, every week I'm going to have another chapter, another review, another interview, whatever.
Yep.
every week. And you do every week for 2 years, you get a book.
I love it.
So,
I love it. Yeah, great perspective. Just making things, and sometimes we chunk things together, right? And we make it's even like, going to the gym. So many people have the intent to go to the gym, but they think about all the steps involved to get to the gym. They think, gosh, I have to go through traffic. I have to go in an environment where people might judge me. I have to pay the money to get there. I have to, and we make all these, we make this one task we want to do feel like something that has 18 items to get to, as opposed to, let's conquer the first one. First thing I need to do to get to the gym is put my shoes on. Second thing I need to do to get to the gym, I need to get in my car. I need to start the car. Then I need to drive. And what you're saying, what I'm hearing from this 3-step checklist is kind of comparable, right? Rather than, you set the goal writing the book, but you're just going to take action every week on those items that you put in step 2 to ultimately help you execute. So thanks for breaking it down for us so simply.
Sure.
I really enjoyed that.
Can I share one more tip for your listeners?
Please.
Is whatever goal you set for yourself, make it easy for you. So like you mentioned going to the gym. I want to go to the gym. Well, how would I make that easy? Well, one mistake people make is the gym's half an hour away.
Right.
You got to really want to go. You know what? I would advise, err on the side of a lower caliber gym that's 2 minutes away versus a superstar gym half an hour away. And the reason for that is make it easy. You don't always have 2 hours to commit to it. Maybe you got 20 minutes, or in that case, if you're focused on health, have a home gym and say, you know what, I've got 15 minutes. All right, we'll run downstairs and hit the elliptical for 15 minutes. Make it so easy. Or, one of my objectives is I like sending postcards to people. And it's not always easy. You got to go find who sells postcards, and then you got to get a stamp, and it's a pain. Well, I keep in my basement an enormous bin of postcards next to a stack of stamps. So for me, if I want to send someone a postcard, I write it, I stamp it, and put it in the box. It's so easy. So that's just an example, but whatever goals you have, make them easy for you.
Great insight. Yeah, great perspective. I've not done the postcard thing. I'll have to try that. I'm a big thank you card guy. I like sending thank you cards after, things, and just handwritten. I think there's a special touch, but
absolutely.
Yeah, postcards are nice.
Yeah.
Well, can you walk us through your, the U.S. patent that you secured for one of your products? I'm really intrigued. In the years I've known you, I never knew about this, and I'm sure you had to simplify that into this 3-step process to actually bring it to life. So I'd just love for you to give us a high-level overview. Maybe there's someone on here who wants to patent a product. Could you just share with us, 1, what the product is, what the process was like, how long it took, and then 3, maybe a step or 2 that we could take if we want to look at patenting our own product?
Sure. Well, I think, at least for me, that whole process was a good application of use time as your ally. Once I had completed the work, it then took me 7 years to get the patent approved. And I'm very stubborn, and it involved multiple back and forth with the patent office. It actually involved 4 in-person visits to the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. And on the 4th one, they finally said yes. And maybe they were just trying to get rid of me. And I finally got it. I got 3 rejections in person, 3 rejections to my face. And I make a revision and come back again. And kept trying. So the patent was, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but we started with, our extended family did what's called a Secret Santa. So some of you might know about this, but the Secret Santa is, we're going to have a group of people, like 10 or 12, and we're each going to buy 1 gift for somebody else. And for us, it was at Christmas. And you write your name down in a piece of paper, and you drop the pieces of paper in a hat, and then you go around and you draw the names. And families and friends have been doing this for, a couple thousand years. It's quite common. Yeah. The challenge with that Secret Santa is, let's say we all throw our names in. Let's say, Adam, you and I are in the same group, and we go around, and then you're the last person to pick. And there's 1 name in the hat, and you pull it out, and it says Adam James. Like, well, that's weird. I can't gift myself. So, all right, everybody throw them back in and do it again. And I started to think about this as a math problem. And you wanted to have a way to restrict, to say, you know what, you can't draw your own name. And I thought, let's expand on that. And if you're playing with spouses, you know what, I don't want to draw my spouse's name because I'll probably buy her a gift anyway. I'm going to draw someone else's name. And maybe I don't want to draw the person that I had last year. Let's mix it up a little bit. Even those simple restrictions make it a math problem with billions and billions of combinations, of which hundreds and hundreds of millions are restricted. Well, that is a math problem that no one had solved. And I thought, you know what? I bet I can do this.
Yeah.
It took a while. I'm no whiz. You know, I actually had to teach myself a brand new programming language. I've done some programming, but there's a language called JavaScript, which I did not know. I bought a few books on it, taught myself, and finally got it to work. It's actually, there's a website live right now. If any of your users want to use it, it's called christmasmatch.com.
Okay.
The graphics aren't that great, but it works. And
Yeah.
it'll tell you, put in 15 names and put whatever restrictions you want, and it'll find a random solution for you. And that's a math problem that got patented. So
Wow, Dave. That's quite impressive. So most of us, when we're doing Secret Santa, are not thinking about the math problem involved. We're excited to get the gift or give the gift.
Yeah.
Here you were exchanging gifts, thinking about how it is that you could solve a math problem with literally billions of possibilities from a standpoint of, you know, who you can give a gift to and who's going to get one back. I mean, I assume if you're dealing with 10 or more people, there are probably billions of possibilities.
That's exactly right.
And you've solved that.
I did that with a different programming language. And then I thought, well, the only way to do this is if everybody in our team sends me their restrictions and then I program it.
Yeah.
Well, then I know, like, that's not right either. So I said, what I want to do is take that solution and actually make it public on the web such that you don't have to tell me anything. You just go to the website and type it in.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's putting in what. You know, those restrictions go in, and then it's completely a random solution, and anybody can do it. Anyway, had fun with it.
What does it mean now that you have this as a patent? Does that mean that no one else can try to solve this type of math problem, or it's already solved? And if an organization were to try to leverage the solution, they would have to pay you to utilize what the solution that you ultimately provide?
Yeah, that's the idea. I'll say this: I have had a lot more success getting the patent than making money at it. So, that was my intention. Was, you know what? I bet I can sell this. I mean, partly it was fun just to do it as a personal challenge. My intention was maybe I can sell this, and the patent application itself wasn't really about Secret Santa. It was about the process of finding an answer that can be used. Like in that case, it was, let's assign gift givers to gift receivers. But I wrote it in such a way that it could be used, you know, for schools. Let's assign students to classrooms, or let's project teams to team members, like a broader solution like that.
Yes.
I have not figured out how to capitalize on that, but you know what? If I never make a single penny at it, I would do it again if I rewound the clock.
Yeah. So did you learn a lot through that process then, having to go, and you got rejected 3 times? I'm assuming you had to learn how to, you know, fine tune the presentation, if you will, and word things. Yeah. You recommend to our listeners that if they've got something they've been wanting to, you know, maybe they've been sitting on a product, an idea or something that they think is very unique, it's not out there in the marketplace, your recommendation, I assume, would be go get that patent.
Get a patent. If you've got a product or a business process that you believe has commercial value. I mean, the patent is commercial protection, meaning if you got a great idea, you want to protect that from someone else stealing your idea.
Right.
And it's not uncommon for someone to have a great idea, be in the process of working on the patent, somebody else sees it in action and just takes it. And there's no violation of the law until you have a patent. So I encourage people to get a patent if they can, if they think they have something of commercial value. I think it's worthwhile. The learning process for me was, I think it helped me in terms of clarity of explanation. So obviously the first 3 times I went to the patent office, I made my pitch. In my mind, I was crystal clear, but it wasn't clear to the listeners. They weren't clear. What are you trying to do? How does this thing work? Why is it patentable? And I thought that was quite obvious, but I'd been working on it for many years.
Right.
And they're sitting there. And I think that was an important lesson for me, just from a communication standpoint, to try and to read your audience and explain it to them where they are.
Yeah, that's
and if, let's say you're trying to explain that patent to someone who's never written any computer code. All right, I'm going to try and explain it in a different way. And that was kind of an aha for me.
There's a lot of value in that. I mean, I've had to think about that in my own career, delivering presentations and so forth. And a lot of times the industries that I'm with, I don't have a deep expertise in what they're doing, right? I'm never expected to come in and be an expert. If I'm in front of a group of medical practitioners, they're not expecting me to know how to diagnose patients. But, my job is to try to speak their language and understand. So what you're saying resonates with me, because I think it's been a value for me in my own life and work. And that if you can meet somebody where they are, find a connection point and identify, what it is that makes them tick, and then speak in such a way to elicit emotion, now all of a sudden, whatever it is that you're pitching or selling or trying to connect on becomes a little more reasonable and understandable.
Yeah, that's very well said.
Well, and I'm just backing off of what you said.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes related to communication is from George Bernard Shaw, and he said, "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred." And I read that and I'm like, holy cow.
Oh yeah, that's
wow. And I thought about my trips to the patent office. In my mind, I was crystal clear with them.
Yeah.
But they weren't tracking.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is another aha for me. The first couple times I walked out of there, I had this about, they just don't get it. They don't get it. And I was kind of upset. It's very easy for someone to say, oh, you know what? That person I'm talking to, they just don't get it. And it flips the script to say, if I'm trying to explain something or convince somebody about something, if they don't get it, that's on me. That's not on them. That's on me.
Yes.
And take agency. And that changed my approach. Like, listen, if what I'm saying isn't clicking, all right, that's a learning experience for me. I'm going to try a different angle.
Yes.
And that's on me. That's not, I can complain about the person not getting it all I want.
Yes.
Anyway.
Could you share that George Bernard Shaw quote again?
Sure. Yeah. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And I just love it. It resonates.
That's going to take some unpacking for me after I get off this call. And it's deep and it's profound, and I didn't want to miss it. Obviously, I'll go back and watch this, and it will be on demand for the listeners. But
that one applies. In my view, it applies certainly in the professional world. It applies to interpersonal relationships. If you have some issue with some other person, excuse me, like we need to have a chat, and you sit down and have a coffee and talk a few things out. Maybe what you said is not what they heard, and vice versa.
Yes.
And you believe, we had this conversation. Now we're good.
Yes.
I believe we had communication, but we didn't. Anyway, I love that quote. It is. The more you think about it, the more eye-opening it is.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. That's great. Well, going back to your career, I'm sure we have some folks at different layers of, their careers on this call. And I think everybody aspires for more. I know not everyone wants to be the CEO of an organization, but I believe that we all aspire for more. With that being said, I'm sure there are some folks on here who want, or folks who will listen, who are maybe looking for that advancement and that promotion. Coming from someone like yourself who's been able to, navigate the corporate structure and go layer by layer and ultimately get to an executive leadership role. Could you just share with us one or two attributes maybe that you've possessed, or things that allowed you to potentially beyond, obviously the technical skills are important, right? You have to be able to perform, but beyond that, what helped you excel to the next level?
Well, I'll share maybe a couple of categories that I think are important for career progress, or I'll say career impact. If I had to pick two for your listeners, I would say learn and communicate. And especially early in your career, focus on learning. If you're deciding about a new job, is that a job where I'm going to learn? And I think about your career progress. You'll be interviewing for some other job or talking to a prospective client. And what really matters is, what is it that you bring to the table? And the more you bring to the table, the more likely it is you're going to have career advancement in your own organization, or an ability to go out on your own and do your own thing, or convince clients, or make an impact in the world. And if that's true, which I believe it is, the more you bring to the table, the better those things tend to go. If that's true, a really important area of focus for all of us should be, let's increase what I bring to the table. And the way you do that is you learn things. And there's so many times you have a conversation with somebody, or you're sitting in a meeting, or maybe you're listening to another podcast or something, and a topic comes up that you don't quite understand. I would encourage your listeners, write that down and go study up on it. And it could be anything. So, one that I just looked, I literally just 2 days ago, they were talking about the problem with the 5G wireless networks and airlines.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I don't actually know that. So I made a note and I started reading about it. Like, what the heck is 5G? How does it work? It runs on different frequencies, and it transmits data in a much more efficient way than 4G. Okay, well, how does that work? Why does that matter to airplanes? That was more of just a curiosity thing. But if there's something like that you want to learn about, that someone else is talking about and you don't understand it, make a note and follow up on it. And it could be anything. In a business context, you know what? You probably need to know about fintech. Well, what the heck is fintech? All right, well, I don't know. I'm going to write it down and I'm going to go take a course on it. For me, a very big topic a few years back was machine learning. And machine learning is impacting every area of life. And I thought, you know what, I know what it is, but I don't know how it works. And I ended up, I read a whole bunch about it. I took 2 online courses. I felt like, this is important for me to know, and I'm going to make sure that I learn it. So the first category I would say for your listeners is learn, meaning just increase what you bring to the table. And I like to, if I give a career talk, I like to say the impactful leaders of the future are those that can connect the dots. You cannot connect the dots unless you know the dots exist. And so you need to have this breadth of knowledge to connect those things. So that's the first one. The other one is communication. If you're going to have an impact on the world, you're going to convince somebody of something. And in my opinion, most people dramatically overestimate their communication skills and clarity of message and understanding of your target audience. And that takes practice. And just get better at it. If you're in a work environment where you send emails or memos, whatever, ask your friend to read it before you hit send. Is this saying what I think it's saying? And will the reader understand what I'm trying to communicate? Public speaking is it's a big part of a lot of jobs, and most people aren't very good at it. Well, get better at it. Practice. That was an area, I'll share with you and your listeners, that's an area that I struggled with a lot early in my career. And I said, I want to be better at this. And I made myself a goal. I will do a stand in front of the room presentation at least once a month for the rest of my life. Wow. And I've been doing that for 20 years, 25 years now. And I would invite myself, when I was newer in my career, I would invite myself to college campuses. They didn't invite me. I would call up and make a contact and say, hey, listen, I want to come do a class for you. And they'd say, hey, I'm teaching tomorrow. Are you free? Well, yes, I am. I'll be there. And, very selfishly for me, and I enjoyed all of those, but very selfishly for me, it was, let's get this practice. And, that the saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And you do more of it and you get better at it. So anyway, that was a very long answer to your question, Adam, but yeah, increase what you bring to the table and work on your communication skills, and things are going to go just fine for you.
That's great. No, tangible advice, and thank you for sharing. I think it's very sound and great wisdom. Transitioning, and I want to be cognizant of our time, Dave, because I'm sure you've got to move on as well. And I think we'll have a few questions here at the end. I hope we do. For those of you who are listening, feel free to put any questions you might have now in the chat box, and then we'll get to them at the end. I'd like to go back to the college space, and we probably don't have any college students on here today, but particularly being in an Ivy League environment, I know a lot of those students are dealing with mental health challenges because there's an inherent pressure to perform. And why I want to talk about it in that culture, because I believe what they're going through is not all too different than what we as people in corporate America are going through from a standpoint of what's going on in our headspace. So would you mind sharing from your perspective what you're seeing as potential challenges and hearing about, amongst college students?
Yeah, I mean, you struck a nerve on this one. This is a big topic, and it can be overwhelming. And you said it exactly right. It's very pervasive on college campuses, but the mental health issue is not limited to college students. Everybody at every age is susceptible to it. Perhaps the biggest learning I've had since coming here to Cornell is the magnitude of the mental health challenge. And in my opinion, it may be the biggest challenges faced by colleges today. And this is not at all unique to Cornell. I have friends at other colleges, and it's overwhelming. I have a daughter in college right now. It's overwhelming. If it's the most important issue facing colleges, it needs to be treated as such. And there's a lot of impediments, I think, to making progress in mental health, whether it's on college campuses or elsewhere. There's still a stigma to it. There's still a bias to it. And I will admit, on this recording, I was guilty of that myself. When I first came here, there was a lot of students that needed extra help, and they would miss class, and they couldn't turn in an assignment on time. And in my first few months, I had this attitude of, you know what, y'all need to suck it up.
Yeah.
Toughen up and you gotta meet these demands. And I have come a full 180 on that. What you have, and what I've seen firsthand, and I've been fortunate, some students have told me, in person, just to me, the kind of challenges they face. And what you find is there's a student that's really smart, super capable, very motivated, very personable, has a great group of friends, has a supportive family, has everything going for them, and they have periods of time where they cannot function. And I think, holy cow, this is a much bigger problem, that certainly bigger than I knew of a year ago when I came here. It's bigger than most people appreciate it. And I know it's gotten a lot of attention. I feel like it needs a lot more attention than it's currently getting. Yeah. And it's easy to blame it on COVID, and in part I do. I mean, it magnifies everything. The pandemic has been this kind of weight on everybody. When you talk about elevated stress levels, it's just like it's a new level of baseline stress. Everybody has it. But I think it goes beyond that. I'm quite down on social media, even though I'm on Facebook every so often myself. I'm guilty of it. I think social media is terrible for teens, adolescents, young adults. Terrible, awful psychologically. And I'll give you an example. So I'm only on Facebook. I don't do any other social media, and I don't post that much on Facebook, but every once in a while I'll post a picture or a meme or something, and I'm going to embarrass myself on recording here. I go back a couple days later and look at how many people liked it. I do this. I'm a middle-aged man. Yeah. I'm very content in my life and my career. I've got all sorts of blessings. Everything's fine. I do it. Imagine if you're 20 years old and you're very unsure of yourself, and you're uncertain about what people think about you and your future, and you're not fully grounded yet, you're not like comfortable in your own skin, imagine what that does to you.
Yes.
And it's overwhelming. So I blame social media for the bulk of it.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know
thank
what the answer is. I don't know how to, I guess, like any problem, the first step is to acknowledge that it's a problem. And, I would say for your listeners, if you believe that social media is detrimental to your mental health, turn it off. Or say, you know what, I'm only going to be on Facebook only on Saturdays or something. If you have that discipline, turn it off. Like we talked earlier about finding a stress trigger. If that is a stress trigger for you, turn it off.
Yes. Great advice, Dave. Just to clarify, first of all, thank you for sharing and thank you for being vulnerable in that experience. You shared that with me a few months ago. And just to clarify and reiterate, you were going back to the picture to kind of measure the likes that you were getting, right? How many did I have, and who liked it, and maybe who didn't. It was, and you were finding some element of fulfillment or lack thereof in the response.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very real, and it's a dopamine rush. It really
Yes.
is, and it's
Yeah.
designed that way. There's engineers that work on the social media platforms that specifically design for that. Like that's what it's built for.
Yes.
And I went back, and you know what? I don't remember how many likes I got, but if it was, a small number, that would impact my outlook for the day. I
Yeah.
can't even, I'm embarrassed to say it.
Yeah.
Once you recognize that, like now, if I post something, I don't go back and look at it. I just make a point. Like I'm going to make myself not do that.
Yeah.
And like it's a stress trigger, avoid stress triggers.
Great lesson there. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about this too. In fact, when I'm positioning the mindful journey as an organizational wellness benefit, that's what I'm sharing as one of the four key triggers that is, ultimately bringing more mental health challenges to our world today. And there's so much research out there that supports it. Dr. Anna Lemke, who's a psychiatrist at Stanford University, was featured in the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. She talks about in the early part of her career, she was, prescribing if a 30-year-old male came in or female came in and said, hey, I'm feeling, a little hopeless, depressed, and I'm not sleeping great. She would almost always prescribe them a small dose of antidepressant. And now she puts them on a 30-day social media cleanse or video game cleanse, whatever form of involvement they're leveraging. And the results have been staggering because they come back feeling more connected to self. You fail to recognize how things like social media can really impact our mood because, like you said, the engineers and the data scientists and these computer scientists, their job is to get us to stay engaged. So it's interesting to hear from your perspective as somebody who, like you said, you're a middle-aged man and has done well by society standards, yet you were impacted by the likes or lack thereof. So thanks for sharing. I'd like to fast forward to just again, because I know we're over the time I told you we would be anyway. Are you good for about 5 or 10 more minutes?
Fine. Yeah, I got
okay,
this.
perfect.
I'm having a good
I'd
time.
like to delve into just a few personal questions because and I shared this with you on the front end, and the listeners already know this now. One of the things I'm always trying to get from each guest is a challenge they've went through of some sort because so often we personalize what it is that we're going through in our life. We feel like maybe everyone else has it all together, and Susie down the street has a perfect husband and car and house, etc. But what I'm going through is unique to just me. And the truth is, we all have challenges. We all have difficulties. So with all that being said, I'd love if you'd be so kind and willing just to share maybe something you've gone through in your life that while going through it was incredibly overwhelming and challenging, and then maybe what you did while in it to help get you through it.
Yeah, well, I've had plenty of challenges in my life. I've had plenty of personal challenges. I'll share with your listeners probably a couple of professional challenges, especially early on in my career. So I went to Cornell. I studied engineering, and Cornell's pretty highly rated engineering. I was proud of myself. I couldn't get a job. I had a bunch of interviews. I didn't get any job offers. And I thought, what the heck? I mean, I feel like I'm relatively personable and, did okay in school. Like, wow. And fortunately, I had a backup plan. My backup plan was to stay for a 5th year and get a master's degree. That was not my intention, but that was my backup plan. It turns out that's the only option I had available to me. And when I look back on it, I realized I was a terrible interviewer, like really awful. I was so focused on me. I wasn't focused on the person interviewing me and what I need to sell myself. And I was terrible. I think back of the, questions I was asked and answers I gave, and they were awful. I never thought about it. I never practiced. I never, prepared in advance. I just didn't know how to do that. That was a big eye opener for me. When I started working, I worked for 3 years before I went back to grad school. The first year I applied to business school, I got rejected everywhere I applied, everywhere. And I thought, maybe this is not for me. The business career is not, I'm not cut out for it. Maybe they're looking for something that's not me. Yeah. And, maybe I was too busy doing engineering stuff and nobody thought I'd be any good at business or whatever. I started doubting myself. Yeah. And I don't actually know how I came out of that, but I enjoyed the job that I was in. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do the exact same thing a year from now. But I'm going to really throw myself at this and do my homework on, if I'm applying to a school, I'm going to do a bunch of homework about that school. And I'm going to include that in my essays. And I really busted my tail. Well, round 2, everybody rejected me again, except Northwestern. And I'm bearing my soul here. I'm a ton of rejections early on, and Northwestern said yes. And I said, well, heck yes, that's where I'm going. Yeah. And it was a very humbling experience. Yeah. And I will say after I got to Northwestern, I had a much easier time for some reason getting the summer internship, getting a job when I graduated. Career progression seemed a bit easier, although there was a few that I got, some jobs I applied to that got rejected. Yeah. And it's hard to not internalize that. Yeah. I think of my approach to that at the time was, I use this philosophy: show up, pay attention, do your best. Yes. You do those things. That's it. Show up, pay attention, do your best. And for every one of these interviews, whether it's a school, whether it's a job, show up, pay attention, like, what am I talking about? And just, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to prepare. I'm going to try my hardest. If you do those 3 things and it doesn't go your way, don't beat yourself up. You did what you could do. You know what? Show up, pay attention, do your best. And I like to think that I applied that. And you can have setbacks that you don't internalize. So if I got rejected, I'll say I really wanted to go to Wharton. I got rejected twice. Yeah. The first time around, I was super discouraged. The second time I got rejected, I thought, you know what? I was well prepared. I showed up. I did my homework. Show up, pay attention, do your best. I did that. Yep. And then I got rejected. You know what? I'm not going to beat myself up. They're looking for something other than what I had to offer. Okay, that's fine. That's not a reflection on me precisely. Right. And that I try to keep that mindset. Easier said than done, because rejection is never easy, and it's human nature to internalize it. But literally, I'll say advice for your listeners: show up, pay attention, do your best. And if you do those 3 things and the cards don't go in your favor on a certain occasion, cut yourself some slack. Yes. Yes. Anyway, that's great. It's a message that we've probably heard before from a standpoint of don't internalize, but the context you provided is important because, again, just people may look at you in your career and say, well, Dave's had it all together from on the front end. He's never experienced rejection, but here you are telling us in this call, the product you were trying to get a patent for, you got rejected 3 times. The 4th time you finally get it. The grad school you're trying to get into, you get denied from all of them except one. And I think there's value in understanding that things are never going to work out as we always anticipate or want them to in our mind. But if we give up every time somebody says no, we're just settling, right? You didn't settle. You fell into a school that actually, by the way, Northwestern's a really good business school. So kudos to you. You should be proud of that. But I'm sure at the time it didn't feel like it.
And learning how to detach, I think, is important. So just hearing it is good, and we all need to do that more often. I think even if somebody tells us yes, our ego can get inflated, and we can now feel like we're untouchable, and that can be detrimental. So that's good stuff. Well, if there's someone who's watching today, Dave, who's got something going on in their life, they're facing a financial difficulty, maybe just having a challenge at work, or maybe just feeling disconnected from their work, what's your message to them if they're feeling any element of hopelessness?
I mean, life can be overwhelming, and it can seem overwhelming, and it's not that uncommon. The first thing I'd say is you're not alone. People have challenges at different points in their life, and it is easy to look at someone else's life and say, well, you got it all going on, and I'm gonna have all these problems. Part of that is you don't really know what challenges people are facing. I will say this though, if you're facing a challenge that's, I got a big problem. I'm massively in debt. I hate my job. I'm spinning my wheels, whatever. I like to think of it in terms of take that big problem and make it into small problems. Big problems are generally not solvable. A string of small problems is solvable. And in doing so, you do solve the big problem. So whatever challenge you're facing, so, let's say that you're overwhelming debt. You have too much credit card debt. Well, you can freak out about that, or you can say, what's the monthly payment that would keep that balance level? And I'm going to do better than that. My goal, I'm just going to reduce that balance every month. And it may take me 2 years. You can think about it for, if you're looking to lose weight, I'm 40 pounds overweight. That's totally overwhelming. Well, you know what? I'm going to try and lose 2 pounds this week. And you take a big problem in your life, and it's not possible for every big problem, but there are a lot of big problems that you can break down into small problems. And small problems are digestible and accessible and solvable. And I'll share one of my favorite quotes from the movie The Martian, where Matt Damon's stuck on Mars. And he said, you solve the first problem, and then you solve the next problem, and then you solve the next problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. Yes. And in his case, his problem, that's about as daunting a problem as you could possibly have. Like, you're either going to starve or suffocate, you're going to die. That's pretty severe. And you know what? Let's get oxygen. Okay, let's do that. I'm just going to breathe. Yes. All right. I need to divvy up my food. Then I need to grow food. Then I need to think about actually leaving the surface of Mars. Like, all those things were small enough problems that he could solve them. And I think it's a good approach. You solve enough problems, you get to come home. Definitely.
No, that's a great movie. And to reiterate for those who may have not seen it, The Martian is Matt Damon is stuck in outer space, right? He's on where's he stuck at? Is he on
the surface of Mars?
Yeah. Okay. So he's on the surface of Mars, and definitely, at the end of the movie is when I think he says that, and that hit me too, because he's talking to the students, or the incoming astronauts, and that's very good. Well, Dave, we can stop there. I'll pause and see if there's any questions. I don't see anything in the chat box right now, but for anyone who's still tuned in, if you've got any questions, please put them in. Dave, thank you so much. This was remarkable. I'm gonna have to go back through and take some notes myself. I tried to scribble some down when you were sharing some of your strategies, but I certainly gained a lot personally, and I know that those who are here today will or did, and those who will listen later, I'm sure will. And so thank you so much.
Adam, thank you for the invite, and thanks to all your listeners for joining. And I'm flattered that you asked me, and I love what you're doing. I love it. Keep it up.
Thank you.
You're making a difference in the world. Keep doing that.
Thank you, Dave. Little by little, solving problems, right? One after the other. So, I don't see any questions, but if anything comes through, I'll send them to you if people have them post. And then if you could, I'll send you a follow-up email, but I'll put the christmasmatch.com out. Then I'd love to be a customer for your book, and then I'll put that into the community as well.
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Have a great day. Good to see you.
Okay. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
See ya.